Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. In our last episode, we saw the Queen Mother starting to take things easier in her later years, but she was still very busy, only this time it was in more leisurely endeavors with family, friends, and racehorses. It was so neat to hear that she even had a loudspeaker installed at Royal Lodge so she could keep up with the daily racing news. So let's see what's going on today. At Noel Coward's weekends, there would be at least one sing-song around the piano. Queen Elizabeth, like everyone else, loved Coward's affectionate parodies of British manners. Some of their favorites were Mad Dogs and Englishmen Go Out in the Midday Sun, The Stately Homes of England, and Don't Let's Be Beastly to the Germans. Peter Cazalet always had the Queen Mother's horses running at Lingfield during the weekends, and these included Double Star, the Rip, Laffy, Malkadar, and Aeschylus. Double Star had been found in Ireland by Cazalet. He cost £4,000, a big amount of money in 1956, but he justified this, winning the Ashton Down handicap chase at Lingfield 3 times. Overall, he won 17 out of the 50 races in which he was entered between 1956 and 1963. In December of 1961, the Queen Mother had one of her best racing weekends. She had 3 winners, Laffy, Double Star, and the Rip. The Rip, born from one of Queen Elizabeth's early favorite, Manitou, out of a mare called Easy Virtue, which was owned by Jack Irwin, the son of the landlord of the Red Cat pub at Wootton Marshes near Sandringham. The Queen Mother bought him for 400 guineas, which turned out to be a bargain. He was broken in by Major Eldred Wilson, DSO, the senior tenant farmer on Sandringham Estate, who had been a prisoner of war, and when he got back home, he became a successful farmer and horseman. He brought on Queen Elizabeth's young horses and became a friend to her. She liked to compliment him by saying that he had a touch of Irish in him. Wilson had been a brave point-to-point rider, and after he retired, he continued to live on the estate. She visited him at home every July, and each year the same conversation was repeated, the same jokes rehearsed, the same laughter enjoyed. She had made similar visits to other retired members of her staff and household every year until the end of her life. Wilson did great with the Rip, who won 4 races in a row in 1962. In the 1964 Hennessy Gold Cup, he was placed 3rd behind the illustrious Arkle and Ferryboat. Altogether, the Rip won 13 races under the Queen Mother's colors. Among her other successful horses, Double Star Chow II won 17 races. In 1964, she had her 100th win with a rather temperamental horse called Gay Record in the Seven Oaks Chase at Folkestone. To celebrate, she gave a dance to which she invited all her friends from the racing world and many from the acting world as well. And according to Dick Francis, who was a jockey, she danced with all the jockeys. During the Cazalet years, Queen Elizabeth had up to 16 jumpers in training with him and with other trainers. After his death in 1973, she cut back the expenses that weren't sustainable. Usually there were fewer than 10, many of them with Fulk Walwyn at his stables in the Lambourne in Berkshire. Walwyn had his own distinguished racing history, and when he was a jockey, he had won the Grand National at Reynoldstown in 1936. He had fewer winners for the Queen Mother than Cazalet, but his winners won bigger races. Racing in horses gave the Queen Mother seasonal and daily pleasure. Like her daughter, she was a good judge of horse flesh and had an encyclopedic knowledge of racing form. She and the Queen were both patrons of the Jockey Club, and when the National Hunt Committee, of which he was patron, merged with the Jockey Club, she became a joint patron. Sir Michael Oswald recalled that, unlike many owners, she took an interest in everyone from the stable, boys, girls, upwards. She always spoke to them and shook hands before looking at the horse. Oswald thought that the Queen Mother understood well what people wanted from her. If she found herself surrounded by people with cameras at an event, she would smile and wave to each side of the road. She invariably stopped to talk to people in wheelchairs. She always wanted to make sure that people who wanted to see her went away happy. She said that her mother always said, "There is no one who is really boring. If you find someone so, it must be because of you." She had wonderful manners, and to the end of her life she would try and get out of her chair to shake people's hands. And she managed to remember people year after year. She was loyal to horses as well as trainers, and she would never sell a horse. Instead, homes would be found for them with her regiments, or with local farmers who could use them for hacking, and she would send them off on a permanent loan. None of this came cheap, and throughout, her racing had to be subsidized by the Queen. After one disappointing year, the Queen offered to pay her mother's bill from Peter Caslett. The Queen Mother accepted gratefully, signed the bill, and wrote underneath the total, "Oh dear." She was involved in the 1984 Whitbread Gold Cup, in which she ran special cargo. That year's race was a class of its own. The Sunday Times correspondent Brow Scott related that. In the final stretch, after 24 fences had been jumped, 4 horses, special cargo, Laddock, Diamond Edge, and Plundering strained toward the post, and the royal box. The Queen Mother was visibly excited. Plundering fell away, and with only 100 yards to go, Diamond Edge was gaining on the leader, Laddock. But special cargo was now within 2 lengths and flying fast. All 3 were together as the post flashed by. First thoughts were that none could be a loser. There were long minutes of suspense as the judges considered the photographs. Queen Elizabeth was unable to move until she knew the result. Special cargo had won by a fraction. Overjoyed, the Queen Mother rushed down to the winner's enclosure, where her pale blue coat matched her jockey's silk. Now we come to the Queen Mother with the Castle Mey. This was the most remote of her houses. It was also the most personal. It was the only one that actually belonged to her. She was able to invest in Mey and her stays there with her own spirits and taste. She would visit every year from 1956 onwards in August, immediately after her birthday, and she used to say that it was the beginning of the holidays and the end of her term in London. She loved the fresh air and the open space that the castle offered, with every changing view of clouds and sea and shadows on the Orkney beyond. Another great advantage was that the furthest tip of these islands one feels so beautifully far away, and the newspapers come too late to be readable, according to the Queen Mother. Her visits to Mey started quietly and modestly. Then things changed. Local landowners made sure they were in residence when she came, and many threw parties in the hope of attracting her, and she gave cocktail parties every summer, which was a major event. There was no question that her ownership of Mey put Caithness on the map. The castle needed constant maintenance even after she completed the basic structural repairs in the 1950s. It was built from porous sandstone, and it was hard to keep the damp out. As the years went by, water seeped through the roof, and leadwork was found to be missing. The first repairs had not been adequate. The furnishings developed and moved over time. Many of the original pieces she and the vendors had bought locally. In the hall there was a chronometer from King George V's racing yacht Britannia, which struck the bells of the watch instead of the hours. The London firm of Lingon and Morant, which worked for the Queen Mother and her other homes, was responsible for much of the internal design and decoration, and supplied curtains and other furnishings. She and those around her were pleased with the results. Today the house is preserved as it was in her lifetime. The main room on the raised ground floor is a drawing room, whose window faces both inland and north towards the sea and the Orkney Islands. A large 16th century Flemish wool tapestry hangs on the north wall, and when she was in residence, a peat fire burned continuously in the grate. Next door to the drawing room is the equerry's room. On the desk, the red leather-bound hymnal and prayer book, which the equerry carried for her to church every Sunday, can still be seen. In this and other rooms are painting and miniature model casts of some of her most successful cattle. Beyond the equerry's room is the library, wherein later in life Queen Elizabeth dealt with her correspondence every day. My hunka-munka room, she called it. On her desk were 3 of her favorite photographs, slightly faded by time: the King in uniform in 1943, the King in South Africa, and the King with her and Princess Elizabeth. And there were various objects, including a little corgi from the Buckingham Palace gift shop. On a small formica table by the wall sits an elderly television, on top of which are photographs of Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret, dressed for wartime pantomime. Against one wall stands a handsome upright piano in a walnut case, which the Queen Mother bought in Inverness, and which she encouraged Ruth Fermoy and others to play after dinner. The most striking room in the house is the dining room at the western end, and this was added in 1819 by the 12th Earl of Caithness as an extension to the original castle. A spectacularly vivid tapestry of her coat of arms, which he commissioned from the Dovecote Studio in Edinburgh in 1950. In the fireplace at the opposite end of the room is a beautiful cast-iron fireback created by Martin Chatteris, the Queen's long-serving private secretary and a friend of the Queen Mother. The piece depicts the Queen Mother's E.R. cipher and the Royal Yacht Britannia among the local flora and fauna. Above the fireplace is a native painting of the castle from the sea painted by R.I. Gray in 1884, and on the other side of the fireplace is an oil painting by Prince Philip, an accomplished amateur painter. And next door to the dining room is the butler's pantry, which by the end of the century had become almost a museum piece of 1950s domestic design, with the white metal doors and drawers, a wheezing ancient gas-fired refrigerator, and an old electric oven in which plates were warmed. Connecting the pantry with the much more modern kitchen below is a steep and narrow staircase and a small dumbwaiter food lift. The dumbwaiter, though, was hand-operated and made a great deal of noise, so the footmen and pages preferred to run up and down the stairs, balancing heavy trays rather than disturb the guests with its wailing mechanism. At the opposite end of the house, Queen Elizabeth's bedroom is reached up the stone stairs in the turret, which she managed to navigate until the end of her life. In the 1950s, she restored the lift that the Imbert Terrys had installed, but she didn't use it very much except for regular Sunday morning descents to talk to the chef and his staff in the kitchen, after which she would insist on walking up the narrow stairs before leaving for church. Her bedroom has north, east, and south-facing windows, which enabled her to keep an eye not only on her cattle and sheep, but also on the comings and goings of the guests in the driveway. Ceilings and walls were all painted light blue. Her bed covers and headboard were also blue and have faded gently with the years. The room is modestly furnished with simple blue painted wardrobe and mahogany chest of drawers. Near her room is a bedroom with a small four-poster bed with pale blue hangings. This is called Princess Margaret's bedroom, although the princess never spent a night there. She didn't really like Mummy's drafty castle. So I will end the video here. In this episode, we got to see the two things that meant so much to the Queen Mother: her horse racing and her castle in Scotland, the Castle Mey. The Queen had a love for horse and steeple racing, and at times she had trouble paying all the expenses it took to keep the horses and trainers and other people that made them the horses racing winners. Then we had a chance to learn more about her Castle Mey in Scotland. She loved the place because it was hers. She had bought it. It was a place to get away from it all. And by the time the newspaper got to her, it wasn't readable, she said. And she had all her touches in the castle with her decorations. She was a Scottish girl at heart, and she loved to go to the castle after her birthday every year. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would be greatly appreciated and would help the channel to keep gaining more viewers who love the royal family like we all do. And as I mentioned before, I created a list of merchandise from Amazon that I thought you might be interested in, and if you click on the link, it takes you to the Amazon page. If you purchase anything, I get a small commission that is of no extra cost to you. But more importantly, I wish everyone a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you.